afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us on Black Love Day. My name is Nia Crawford. I am the outreach coordinator with the African American Civil War Memorial Museum, and I'm excited that you are able to join us today. And as I said, happy Black Love Day again. Um, just for some background introduction information. You all are probably all aware of Valentine's Day, but not too many people are aware of Black Love Day. So Black Love Day was created in 1993. It was founded by Mama Ayo, and she is also she's an author, she's an advocate, but she is also the founder of the African American Holiday Association. So, although we're highlighting today, we'll be highlighting Black marriages and Black unions during the Civil War. This holiday is intended to celebrate not only love relationships between men and women, but also love relationships amongst African American families within our own communities and continuing to show love to ourselves. So, if you all don't know, the African American Civil War Museum is located in Washington, D.C. And we actually got the inspiration for this program from an exhibit at the National Portrait Gallery, which is called Civil War Era Power Couples. And if you haven't been, the exhibit showcases portraits of a lot of generals with their wives and just different couples during the Civil War era. But in that exhibit, there are no United States colored troops. And we know how rich their stories are of their love relationships during the Civil War. So we thought it was important to spend today highlighting those. So throughout this program, you'll hear rich stories that exemplify what the role of Black love was in terms of resistance and survival for the United States colored troops. And you'll be hearing that from our Director of Education, Dr. Dawn Chitty. But before I pass it over to Dr. Dawn Chitty, I did just want to go over some brief housekeeping rules if you have not been on a call with the African American Civil War Memorial before. We do ask that you keep yourself on mute while the presentation is going on. Towards the end, we'll have time for question and answer. So about 15 minutes will be dedicated to this. But we do really encourage an interactive chat throughout the presentation. Feel free to drop anything, of course, all respectful things in the chat during the presentation. And while Dr. Dawn is presenting, I'll keep my eye on it. So I'll monitor the chat if there are any questions or comments that come up that would be useful during our Q&A session. So with that being said, once again, happy Love Day and happy Black Love Day. And I'm going to pass it on to Dr. Dawn Chitty.
Hi, how are y'all doing today? Thank you, Nia, for opening us up. So marriage in many cultures is defined as a sacred union. Prior to the 20th century in America, between African Americans, marriage has seldom been treated with the same reverence. The antebellum period before was characterized by profound challenges as enslaved African Americans navigated love, marriage, and relationships under the shadow of slavery, and free Blacks grappled with systematic racism and limited rights. Despite these conditions, Black love thrived as a source of resistance and hope. Choosing to build a family unit and holding on to it in enslavement was a significant fear. As chattel slavery, slaves were objects. Marriage for them was not an inviolable union between two people, but whatever was defined or allowed by the master. Enslaved people risked not only being separated from family, but also being forced to create unions for the benefit or economic gain of another. First and foremost, let's look at the difference between slave marriage and legal marriage. Marriage was considered a legal and binding agreement between two people. Yes, we have all of those romantic notions attached to marriage, but there were laws governing marriage, and the choices attached to legal marriage did not apply to enslaved persons. That was a real notion in the Dred Scott decision, where Gorsuch said that Negroes had no rights the courts were bound to respect. Enslaved persons could not enter into legal agreements recognized under the law, including marriage. During the war, legal marriages were granted to free people. Throughout this presentation, I will try to distinguish between the two and some of the stories that I will tell. What impact did enslavement have on the family structure and relationships? In my opinion, It impacted heavily choice, control, autonomy over their lives. Eliza Randolph and Miles Green were both children when they were sold from different Virginia plantations. They both ended up near Donaldsonville, Louisiana. Both having been separated from family, they sought comfort in each other. Life was brutal for them. Both on a sugar plantation, they united in a slave marriage in the parlor of their enslaver's home in the 1850s. Some years later, before the war broke out, their legal owner died, and they both fell under the control of his son, who forced Eliza to live on a plantation several miles away from Miles and repeatedly raped her. She gave birth to several of his children. Eliza recounted later in a pension file for Miles's service during the war that although he was forbidden to see her, Miles would leave his plantation without permission in the dead of the night 2 to 3 times a week until the war came to see her. When New Orleans fell to the Union control, Miles told Eliza he was going to join the Union Army. She actually said in the pension file, he came to see me first and to tell me goodbye. Miles served with distinction, having been promoted to sergeant by the end of the war. Eliza said, just as soon as his time was out, he came home and found me, and we went to living together right away. Life was not always easy for them after the war ended. Miles died on the plantation where he first met Eliza. She was right by his side until the end. By the way, their story is also recounted in the book 272, The Families Who Were Enslaved and Sold to Build American Catholic Church by Rachel Swarns, because Miles was one of those 272 individuals sold to save Georgetown University. Their story shows the value that African Americans placed on those family relationships despite adversity and the sacrifices they made to keep them. But not all relationships were made of the love that Eliza and Miles had. Some unions were forced in enslavement, and in freedom, freed people fought to define the unions they wished to have, ones that were under their control. F.E. Grossman, a Freedmen's Bureau agent in Lake City, Florida, wrote in October 1866 of Madison Day and Maria Richard, a couple that had been living together as man and wife in enslavement for 7 years, during which time they had 3 children born to them, the oldest of which was 6 years old. Both husband and wife refused to legalize their relationship, and both wanted to claim the children, and they wished ardently to live separately. The matter was put before Grossman to determine who would keep the children, and he was right to say that the procedures did not lend him any help in deciding what to do in that case. Both parents were equally poor, but loved their children deeply. So he sent the case on to the assistant commissioner for the state of Florida to decide the matter. I would love to say that I know how their story ended, but I don't. Maria and Madison's story may have been a normal couple that found that they had no liking for each other by the time you get to the war. But it also points out the stark reality that just as enslaved people had no choice over keeping together families they built in slavery, they also had none over the ones that were decided for them. They could have been in a union determined by their legal owner in a thirst for them to breed more slaves, which was not uncommon. How did the war provide agency for Blacks to reclaim family lost in slavery? The Emancipation Proclamation clearly outlines the promise of freedom in exchange for service. I mentioned in Miles and Eliza's story, Miles' service in the Union Army. He served in the 80th and 88th United States Colored Troops, and like so many soldiers, claimed freedom for himself and his family. Franklin was living as a free man in Barnwell County, South Carolina, when he married Celia Buford in 1862, in what was somewhat like a slave marriage. I say somewhat like a slave marriage because Celia was enslaved and had no legal right to make lawful decisions for herself. A local pastor spoke the words over their union, and that was that. Any children they had together would be enslaved because Celia was enslaved to the Black family in Williston, South Carolina. Franklin told his brother that he was enlisting in the Union Army because he wanted his daughter to know what freedom felt like. He never got to see that because he died during his service. There were many soldiers like Franklin who went off to war, their service a determination to change their family's future. And perhaps love was a motivating factor. Despite the challenges of a union between a free and enslaved Black, Celia and Franklin persisted in remaining together. Celia never remarried. Here are a few marriage certificates provided by Elizabeth Laney at the Institute for the Study of Reconstruction era of two soldiers from the 33rd United States Colored Troops and two from the 35th United States Colored Troops attesting to their legal marriage in their pension files. Marriage is linked to civil rights in these soldiers' cases. Corporal Murray of the 107th USCT stated, "The marriage covenant is at the foundation of all rights," end quote. And because the ability to keep and hold together such unions was not in their control, marriage for enslaved people was not as wrapped up in freedom and liberation as it was love. Love letters written by Black soldiers during the Civil War provide a rare and intimate glimpse into the emotions, struggles, and resilience of these individuals during a transformative period in American history. These letters, often exchanged with their loved ones, wives, fiancés, or families, convey themes of love, hope, dedication amidst the challenges of war and the fight for freedom. Having enlisted in the 54th Massachusetts Regiment, Lewis Douglas, eldest son of Frederick Douglass, went to war leaving behind the love of his life, Helen Amelia Logan, a free woman, activist, and educator. Lewis's letters to Amelia, this letter in particular, was written from Camp Meigs, Reedville, May 20th, 1863. His love for her is evident as he expresses his commitment to the war and to the abolitionist cause. Many of the letters I have found from Lewis to Amelia start off the same way with the affectionate moniker, "My own dear Amelia." This snippet I provide here is a letter that Lewis devoted a significant amount of time detailing why he was fighting and the need for his sacrifice. Think of me as aiding in the glorious work of bursting loose those chains which keeps the husbands, wives, children, lovers, and friends of millions asunder. In a way, I thought about the figures in some of my earlier stories, like Eliza and Miles, who had traversed so much to be together. Lewis thought about them too. Letters between husbands and wives, between lovers, provide a glimpse of the experiences and the values of African Americans during and after the war. You can see how much Lewis is invested in a cause that put him in the 54th Massachusetts, but also in his love for Amelia as well. Philip Gray, a freedman from Virginia, looked for his long lost wife, Willie Ann Gray, and their daughter, Maria, after the war. He found them in Kentucky, where they had been sold. Willie Ann had since married and given birth to three more children. This second husband had been killed in the war. While her love for Philip still endured, when she heard a rumor that Philip was going to retrieve their daughter and not her, she wrote to him and said, "I know that I have lived with you and loved you then, and I love you still. Every time I hear from you, my love grows. You must not think my family too large and get out of heart, for if you love me, you will love my children. You will have to promise me that you will provide for them all as well as if they were your own." With that ultimatum in hand, Philip asked the Freedmen's Bureau for funds to help get his family to Richmond, Virginia. The story of Philip and Willie Ann is one of loss and gain. Philip's enduring affection for his wife kept him searching for her and pushed him to accept her changed circumstances when he found her. Now that the shackles of enslavement were gone, they had a chance of reshaping their union. There were many freedmen who took that chance to reaffirm bonds made in slavery, while others chose to move on. The entanglements that caused are deep. There are scores of stories in pension files of wives seeking pension support from one soldier who formed relationships with multiple women at different points, leaving the Bureau of Pensions the unsavory task of determining who rightfully had a claim on the soldier's pension. By the way, the picture shown here is not of Philip and Willie Ann, but an unknown soldier and his companion. I found very few pictures of couples like this, and I can imagine the circumstances of this being the indulgence of a picture before a soldier leaves off to war. Okay, so remember I mentioned entanglements. Let's look at Clary and William. Both were born enslaved and ended up sold to a plantation in Alabama. They grew up together, according to Clary, and she knew no life without William. They both ended up at Corinth in Mississippi. Excuse me. Clary found herself pregnant with their first child when they arrived at Corinth. When legal marriage swept through the camp in record numbers, Clary figured her and William would be among them. William married someone else, a woman named Mary. Clary, of course, tries to get William to look after his child and her, hence the snippet from her letter demanding he acknowledge the union that they had had for years as man and wife. William dies before the end of the war, leaving these women to fight over his pension. Mary and William never had a child, and while they failed to award either widow a pension, they do eventually award William and Clary's child a pension in later years. Both Willie Ann and Clary were forced to define their expectations of what marriage and family meant to them in the context of slavery and freedom. Pictures are some of my favorite tokens, with so many unidentified pictures taken during the war. I'm sometimes forced to use my imagination to imagine the stories behind them. Fortunately, this one is not an unidentified couple. This is Edward Richardson and his wife, Fanny Sturgis. Edward was born enslaved in Maryland. At least we know that much. They may have posed for this photo on the occasion of their wedding. Edward became a sergeant for the 22nd United States Colored Troops, and I believe it's Yale University that has a really nice picture of him with his GAR medal on. He married Fanny in 1866. Here's another picture of Edward and Fanny with their 3 daughters. Love during the Civil War stood as a testament to resilience, hope, and the humanity in the face of unimaginable hardships. For Black soldiers and their loved ones, love was both a source of strength and a profound act of defiance against a society built on their oppression. Through tender letters and unwavering commitment, they preserved their bonds across battlefields and distances, weaving together personal devotion with the broader fight for freedom and equality. Freedom not only offered the opportunity to reunite and secure family units, it offered people the opportunity to make conscious choices for themselves and claim autonomy over their lives. However, this love was not without its challenges. The war often separated couples for long periods, leaving families vulnerable to economic instability and uncertainty. Black soldiers faced the dual burdens of combat and racism, enduring unequal pay, discriminatory treatment, and the constant threat of capture or death. Meanwhile, their loved ones at home lived under the lingering dangers of racial violence and systematic inequality, even as they supported the war effort and nurtured their families. I could speak for days on the number of letters and personal accounts from different soldiers about family. And some of them speak for their love of family, but there's an untold amount of letters that speak of soldiers that gave a lot of thought to the family's care and support while they were off at war. And some soldiers even requested being let go from their service to make their way home to care for their family that they felt were being mistreated in light of them not being present. In closing, I want to thank you all for joining us for this program. I'm going to say that the idea was dropped in my lap by Nia Crawford mostly, who was inspired by not only the exhibition at the gallery, but also a program where we shared, a letter was shared from a South Carolina soldier's pension file where his widow recounted of her love for him in the aftermath of the war. So I'll open up for questions now.
Well, there's no questions as of right now, or if people are taking their time to think about questions. I just wanted to say thank you for that presentation. I have to keep myself on mute over here the whole time because I was just like, oh, like just loving hearing all these stories, and then also the interesting story of the soldier passing away and the 2 women having to fight over the pension. does, in a way, kind of remind me of like something very modern day. So thank you for sharing those stories, Dr. John.
You're welcome. That story struck me as very modern as well. Something I feel like maybe I've seen something like that on TV.
Yes.
I could just feel the angst in Clary's words and her determination when she was writing to William that, look, I don't care what your thoughts are, but we have this child. So responsibility is calling and come. So
Yeah.
I think my favorite one was probably Lewis Douglas, um, because of no matter so some of his letters are very quickly written, like I'm off to a battle in like a few minutes or whatever, but he always took the moment to address Amelia with um, deep affection, and that just endeared him to me even more. I knew that he was engaged when he went off to war, and basically that they spoke during the war through letters, but just everything, his morals and everything that he was trying to convey, his passion for what he was doing was in those letters, and I could really feel the affection that they had for each other.
Yes, it's beautiful. Every letter him addressing her as my own dear Amelia is so sweet. So
Yes. Like I need my text messages to say my own dear Dawn.
that kind of affection needs to be brought back.
Yes.
But if are there any questions from the audience? I did get a question in the chat about if we will be um rec- sending out the presentation, and yes, the presentation is recorded, so we'll be sharing it with those who join the call, and then we'll most likely drop it also in the Descendants group on Facebook, so you all will have access to it.
Hello, my name is Florence Bowers, and I have been researching a member, technically of my husband's family, who's a member of the United States Colored Troop, the last troop actually to um, have entered from the state of Kentucky. And so we have a precious letter that was written while my husband's great grandfather, whose name was John Daniel, was technically stationed here in the state of New Mexico. And I'm saying all of this to really give you a compliment on the presentation and to also say how grateful I am that you have identified the names of at least two photos that I have seen throughout my research, but the photos never had a name. They were not tagged on them. So I appreciate your efforts, and I absolutely am looking forward to another review of this presentation, which I understand you recorded and I can view it again later. So
Yes.
thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you so much. It is uh excuse me, it is difficult to go through a lot of pictures and see that they are unidentified, and I see a lot of that in looking at pictures of USCT soldiers and looking for couples. This was kind of like finding unicorn. uh there just were not that many pictures that I came across. um and the ones that I did have a name for. There's actually one that I did not share that there was a name for. Let me see if I could go back to it. It was in the collection of photos at the beginning. This family here, in a Kentucky newspaper,
Oh,
they identified him as Samuel and her as Molly, so that they were possibly at Camp Nelson. So it was just basically like that one's newer, because we have this photo inside of our exhibition, and we're going through the renovation. So I was so excited to be able to amend the information with them in that photo. So being able to know who they are. That was just fabulous.
Oh, let me have you to pause again, and I'm excited. I've seen that photo over and over again. My subject, John Daniel, was from Kentucky and actually did his training at Camp Nelson.
Oh.
So I'm wondering if is there a way that I can individually pull that picture and you give me their name again? Can you email that to me?
Yeah, I can email that to everyone.
Yes, yes. If you could pull that photo, and by the way, I should tell you that particular photo is the center cover photo from the name of I'm so nervous here. When you said Camp Nelson, I I had to I had to take a breath. Um, my research on John Daniel has been a serendipitous experience since 2003. And along the way, all of these bits and pieces have just appeared in the universe. And of all the family members, maybe because I'm the one that sees him, they've dropped in my lap. And so when you said Camp Nelson, I felt like this was another serendipitous experience. But for your information, the title of the book, which this picture appears on the cover, I Can't Wait to Call You My Wife. And
Yes,
it's by an author named Rita Roberts. I don't know if that's new information for you, but
I have the book.
very good.
Yes, I have the book, and I did draw some information from that. Another book that's really great is called Bound in Wedlock, and this picture here is on the cover. I fell in love with this picture so hard that one of the images that's an intro image inside of the exhibition that's really big. That I tracked down this photo to use it, to get permission to use it in the exhibit. So that book is really an awesome tome. There are also some stories that I found from like other bit pieces. Um, I'm trying to think of the name of the article, but there's an article that is multiple authors, but I know one of them was Ira Berlin is on there, and it's a compilation of different letters that includes some from Freedmen's Bureau representatives that talk about marriage, and some quotes from different soldiers that talk about basically the soldiers' impressions or feelings about being able to legally marry. So it was really great to get those personal accounts, because I will say that when we have an idea for like a session like this, it's easier said than done. So sometimes the idea is there, and then finding the resources is a little bit of a dig. And this one was a big dig. I spent quite a bit of time digging for these letters, because I have so many USCT letters, and then finding ones that specifically relate to the topic that you're presenting on is difficult. So that being love, or talking about marriage and courtship, etc., it might be few and far behind. There's some other people's stories that I was not able to include in this presentation, but they're no less worthy of being shared. So I do hope to like expand on this a little bit more in the future.
Absolutely.
Hey, James Morale speaking. I just, as I'm listening to this presentation, it just, and this is just a statement, makes me kind of also reframe any of the any of the pension records that widows had to provide for receiving pension. Like I know for me, I have, one of my ancestors' pension records for my grandfather, who was a colored troop who had passed away. But as she is talking about, the history of kind of where they are, what plantation they were on, kind of how they met their kids and those kinds of things. This presentation makes me reframe and think about that as a type of love letter, right? As her, granted, she was, going to receive pension, and she was looking to receive that pension, but she was also expressing, the life and the love that she had for this person, not in terms of, that amore type love where, she's expressing that explicitly, but rather she's talking about the life that they had. And for me, I'm just kind of reframing and seeing that as through the lens of, her love for her love for my grandfather who she was trying to receive this pension for. So just, again, thank you for the presentation. Great presentation. Just getting me to think about reframing, how I look at all the pension records that exist.
Yes, definitely take another look at them. There's some pension files and things that I looked at with this presentation that I took another keen glance at, and I was able to really see a lot of the words between the lines. I have seen a couple of different letters with Lewis Douglas to Amelia, and I never kind of like really looked at them through the lens of doing this kind of presentation until lately, and I realized that they had a pattern in the way that he spoke to her in the letters that it spoke to me, and I was just so in love with that. But also looking at Eliza and Miles, their story was huge. She got very detailed in the pension record speaking about Miles, and you could really see the affection she bore to him even after he had died. Her sister gave an affidavit in there, and she even spoke about basically that the couple was devoted to each other. Even in their youth, when they, were young, they got, married young before they really even knew what it meant to be together. So that was something that I was like, just reading between more closely and between the lines, you see a lot more just giving it another glance.
I was also gonna add just like you had mentioned earlier, Dr. Don, that a big shout out to the Institute for the Study of Reconstruction, who kind of pinged this to come up in our mind when we recently did our regimental meetup with South Carolina. So my first kind of view of a love letter in terms of like the Civil War era was through a pension record, just because they wrote so affectionately about their loved
Hmm.
one, and just like Mr. Morale said, like the life they lived. So it was really, really cool to have
Yeah.
you like pull up the actual letters that they sent to each other, because that was pretty much my only reference of like somebody
Hmm.
writing out their affections for their partner during the Civil War. So yes, I
Yes.
definitely see pension records as love letters, but I'm so grateful that you were able to also share these letters with us.
Thank you. I also wanted to point out that my ancestor story was included in on this because I wanted to speak from the perspective of basically of a free Black um, individual during the Civil War, and basically those relationships that basically traverse somebody in the relationship being enslaved. And so Franklin was my great great grandfather. Um, and he married Celia. Their only child was also named Celia. And she's my great grandmother. Um, so she was born of their union, but she never knew her father because he died when she was um, a child, a very young child. And I took another look at the pension file because I was just going to briefly like write about their story, but taking another look at the pension file, I looked at what people said about her love for him in the community, and her love for their child afterwards and caring for them. And that was something that was noted in a pension file. But also the reason for Franklin going to war. There were 2 letters that basically were written between him and his brother, and it was an older brother that asked about his desire to go off to war, that it was pretty much a crazy notion and people are dying. Why would you do that? And basically his answer was that he goes to make a place in the world for his daughter, because he wants her to grow up and know what freedom feels like. That's the ultimate love of a parent for a child, that moves me to this day, and knowing that the outcome of that union is my generation as well, is something I wanted to share, especially in the dynamic of how these family units were created, both during and after the war.
That's so beautiful, and that's even more rich to have your own family story included in this. That's really cool. And then just to clarify, that was the gentleman who wasn't able to make it back from war.
Yes,
But okay.
yeah, he died in Savannah, Georgia.
Wow. Well, thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome.
Um, are
So,
there oh, sorry, go ahead.
oh, I was just gonna say that if there are no more questions, um, I did want to definitely share. The graphic will be shared by email and also in the Descendants group, that shows just a rundown of all the events and things that are planned for the grand opening week. And I hope some of you are able to make it. So I just wanted to share that with you before we end.